Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. And today we're looking at the indictment of the former president of the United States by New York DA Alvin Bragg. Now, it's very interesting to see and observe Alvin Bragg when he first took office. And when he initially took office, and I think this is very, very important, is looking at his policies on certain offenses. On January 4th, 2022, after 3 days in office, Alvin Bragg announced that his office would no longer prosecute low-level offenses such as fare evasion, resisting arrest, prostitution, and cannabis-related misdemeanors unless accompanied by a felony statement of charges. Is that not subjective law? It doesn't matter what his personal opinion is about the law. He is just waving his magic wand and saying, I am not going to honor thy law. Alvin Bragg also decided to seek lesser charges for burglaries, store robberies, where the offender displays a dangerous instrument but does not create a genuine risk of physical harm. What does that even mean? So if I enter a bodega and I pull out a handgun and I put it in your face and I demand you hand over all your money, I assume that means that could be subjective in that person because he says, well, the gun wasn't loaded, or I really didn't mean to, I wasn't going to shoot anybody. That could mean that he's not going to prosecute that person. On January 20th, Bragg disputed what he described was legalistic interpretation of his prosecution policy memo and indicated that he supported a zero-tolerance policy for violent crimes. We know that's not the case. We know that is definitely not the case. And we also know that Alvin Bragg's indictment of the former U.S. president is politically motivated. If this was someone from his, Alvin Bragg's, political party that wishes to see a unitary one-party state in the United States, which will soon become the former United States, he would not be seeking charges. Again, I say this again, if the former president was a member of the Democratic Party, he would not be proceeding with charges. That is of 100% certainty. Absolutely. So what's going to happen next? Florida is also is saying that they will not extradite the former president of the United States to the state of New York. I have a feeling that the former president of the United States will go to New York, and ultimately we'll have to see what happens. But again, I would say this is the first use of the police state against political opponents by the future unitary one-party state. Now, I would not want to be that district attorney. I would imagine that that district attorney, this is the same district attorney that was indoctrinated, just like we observed in Stanford. Remember the Stanford video of the screaming far-left radicals shouting down a sitting federal judge? Law students. This is what happens. This is what you get. And I can tell you that those students in Stanford, those screaming radicals, are going to be much, much worse, much more subjective than this New York DA. Now, undoubtedly, this DA has just made it on a list. And I would imagine this is a growing list. And I would not want to be on this list. There are individuals in the U.S. military, former members of the U.S. military, that are greatly concerned about what is happening inside the United States, especially this move by this New York DA. And again, undoubtedly, that New York DA, just like that Stanford commissar for equity and inclusion that attacked the sitting federal judge while he spoke, undoubtedly she has also made it on a list. And again, I would not want to be on this list. This is not a list that anyone in their right mind would want to be on. And unfortunately, this list is cause and effect. When you start using the state as a means to persecute political enemies with the goal of creating a unitary one-party state that tears up the U.S. Constitution and destroys U.S. democracy, if that is your intent, you are going to make it on this list. And I say list, and what I mean is based on past history. When we see this sort of activity take place, like we're seeing right now in New York, which we saw in Stanford, which we're seeing all over the United States, it is a repeat of history. Again, circle back to the Spanish Civil War. A horrendous war. It was the first real war between what I would define as left versus right. And if you look at what happened in Spain, and you look at what happened in Spain very closely in terms of the 1930s up towards 1939, and if you look at the technology that now exists today, both sides were taking names. And those persons that were then placed on these lists, once all hell breaks loose, it does not go well for them. And if this New York district attorney is letting out hardened criminals from Rikers Island who have committed burglaries, who have done all sorts to include violent crimes, while you're focusing your efforts on attempting at least to make it where the former president of the United States cannot run again. And that's a political attack. When you make the law subjective and people no longer believe in the law, people are not going to follow the law, especially if they then perceive you as an enemy. There is going to be a reaction. And it is not going to be a nice reaction. And again, we continue down this path, and you have a lot of people, a lot of folks, who simply do not believe the government anymore. And there's a variety of reasons, one of which is what we're seeing right now in New York. Other reasons will include government officials, all of whom, far leftists, are now attempting to say that men can have children, men can get pregnant, men can have babies. Just the most craziest things that at one point in time would have been considered sheer insanity is now being used as a method of control. You have to accept this because I'm telling you you have to accept this. Me and about 5% of these people over here are telling you that you have to accept this. No, we're not going to accept it. So there we have it. We'll see what happens next. Again, this is this march towards something that I fear that people really don't understand is what is going to happen next. And it's not going to be good. And I think ultimately is the question, do you like toilet paper? Do you like power? Do you like running water? Well, if you like those things, you're probably not going to have them at a certain point. Because that's where we're heading. Again, look to what happened in Spain. 1930s, during the Spanish Civil War. We are replicating that right now in the United States. Absolutely. 100% without a doubt. And there's a quickening to it because of this rapid movement of information over the internet. So we'll continue to watch the situation. Again, this would be a military issue because at a certain point, it is going to become a military issue in the United States, unfortunately. That's all I have. Good day.